theyeshiva.net. Morgan, the niggin that we just played, the song is known as the Poltaver niggin, or niggin mi Poltava. Poltava is a city in the Ukraine. Actually, my mother's father came from there. And my great-grandfather, my mother's father's father, was a Rav in a city, in a shul in Poltava called the Soldatska Shul, the shul of the soldiers. Hadich is in the Poltava area in the Ukraine. The Rav of Poltava was a Jew named Rabbi YY Mordechai Bezpelov. Rabbi YY Mordechai Bezpelov. And when he would daven, he would sing this niggin. I think he composed the niggin. He was from the great minds and hearts in Chassidus Chabad, a chassid of the Rebbe Maharash, a chavrus of the Rebbe Rashab, a big man, and a great man, I should say. And when he would sing, when he would daven, he would... Chabad, it was very customary that in the middle of davening, they would sing nigunim, people themselves, to themselves. It's part of the hisbonenus, part of the meditation and mindfulness during davening. So he would, sometimes they would, complete chapters, sections of davening was with a niggin. The Poltava Rav, or in the middle of davening, they would just stop and meditate and sing a niggin. So the Poltava Rav would sing this niggin. That's why it's called the Poltava niggin, because he was from Poltava, the city of Poltava. He was the Rav in Poltava. So this is known as the Poltava Rav's niggin. It's a very, very powerful niggin. No, it can't be niggin. The Chavre know the niggin. We sang it a few times. Reb Nuchem always likes us. Reb Nuchem always asks to sing it. Today is Chaf, the yahrzeit of the father of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Hagon, HaChassid, HaMekubel, Rabbi YY Jacobson, Baruch Schneerson, who passed away Chaf Tavshin Daled, 20th of 1944, middle of the war. He was arrested by the Soviets in 1939, before Pesach. He was the Rav of the city of the Dnepropetrovsk, and also in the Ukraine, used to be called Yekaterinoslav. And his work to preserve Yiddishkeit in the Soviet Union was legendary. He was the Rak of Ukraine. And in 1939, they finally arrested him, and he was exiled to Kazakhstan, a place called Chile, a little far from a village. And ultimately, he got permission to go to Alma-Ata, also in Kazakhstan. And there, from the horrible conditions and the terrible persecutions, he fell ill, and he succumbed to his illness, and he passed away on this day, Chaf of Tavshin Daled. So we'll learn L'Zeicher Nishmasi Hakdosha V'Tahira. It's kedai also to give tzedakah. You can learn Mishnayos, and really an extraordinary person. You don't have to look far, but to see the type of son who he and his wife brought to the world. So we're in the middle of the Maamar and Ledodi Tovshin Yud Beis, where we're focusing on davening. The Maamar, we're up to page 138, a little before the paragraph that starts Vihine. This is the Maamar and Ledodi V'Doidi Li, Haroya B'Shishanim. We spoke about the difference of Torah and Tefillah at length. I'm not going to review it, because you know that when I start reviewing, bleibt man darten. Since we want to move on, and the whole Maamar is about the stages of Tefillah, so I should also move on and not get stuck. So after explaining at length the difference of Torah and Tefillah, Milmaila Lamata, Milmata Lamaila, which I hope you understood at least somewhat, and if not, You'll review the previous shiurim. We already had 2 shiurim in this Maamar. And even if you did understand, hopefully you'll review the shiurim in the Maamar. He spoke about the fact in this paragraph that tefillah is a sulam, it's a ladder. And the ladder is mutzav arza, but v'roishe magia hashamayma, the top of the ladder reaches heaven. And a ladder has stages. You don't skip the rungs, only in unique situations. Usually you climb the steps of the ladder in an incremental and organized fashion. So he said, tefillah starts with hoidu. Hoidu l'Hashem kiru v'shmei, hoidu v'amim aliloisav. And the key word is hoidu. Hoidu is hoidah. Hoidah means thanks. Ani modelecha, toda rabah. Right? I'm so thankful to you, I'm grateful to you. Moida ani. It also comes from the word lahoidos. Like, also thank you. We say toiv lahoidos l'Hashem. But then there's also the concept of hoidah, which means I'm moida to you, which is a form of surrender or a form of submission, like I'm moida to somebody. It's also connected to the word vidui, which is also a form of submission. I confess. When I say I'm sorry, I confess. Shamnu bagadnu, we say vidui tachnon, is also a form of hoidah. And it starts off with a general hoidah klal is called hoidu. He says, but before that there's moidani. That's the real opening of davening, because the moment we wake up, even before we wash our hands, we say moidani lefanecha malachai v'kayam shechazarta b'nishmasi b'chem l'rabba munasach. The person still has tumah on the fingers, but nonetheless, because every Jew is a neshama, it's a chelik elei mal, and he said chelik ha'etzem kshat ha'toifes b'chelke at ha'toifes b'kulei. So the person says moidani lefanecha. True. It's not hypnimius, it's not internalized, the person just woke up, but it has a maila. The maila is that it comes from the etzem, it comes from the core. It's not sophisticated, it's not developed, it's not fully internalized, it's before Birchas HaShachar. Birchas HaShachar, he said, is the time of his chalkos HaKoiches. It's the time that we identify the different functions of the body and the different functions of biology, the different systems that make our organism work. We start off with Hanais and Lasach Vivina, Peikei Achivrim, Matir Asudim, Zeikav Kfufim, Al Besharumim. There's different Eschayas in the Seder of the brachas, but the common denominator is that you go through the brachas, and each bracha is not stam. When you say brachas, it's kedai to be ma'ir. People say brachas already from when they're children, they don't think. It's kedai. Brachas in many ways, we see from here, Moedani and brachas is really the yesod of the day. It's the prerequisite for davening also. There are those who have a minute to say brachas in shul. Over there, it's Maamar sometimes abgezakt. Even those, minute Chabad is to say the brachas in the house right when you wake up. Even if you're davening, you're going to shul later, half an hour, you're going to learn. You first say brachas. And it's very important when you say brachas to think about the brachas. If you need an English siddur, or a Yiddish siddur, another siddur, it's kedai. But every bracha, what it's saying, it's identifying another system that's working. Asher yatzer es adam b'chachma, Elokai neshama, hanaisin lasachvi, pekei chivrim. Each one it defines a different kayach that's functioning in the body. As he puts it, it's asiyas hakelim. It's the structure of human life. Moida ani is before this. Moida ani is a haidah that encompasses the person completely from head to toe. There's no division because it comes from the etzem hanefesh. And it touches Hashem in the etzem. Moidani lefanecha, beyond names. Later we say names. Elokai neshama, baruch atah Hashem. The reason there's no names in Moidani is because you can't say Hashem's name because it's before Netilas Yadayim. The pnimiyas reason is because you're talking to Atzmos. You're talking directly, you're touching. Your essence is touching the essence. Still, this is a preparation for davening. Because in terms of giluyim, which means in terms of consciousness, it's called a hidah klolis. It's not yet shayach to pnimiyas. Person just woke up. It's the first glimmer of consciousness. Moidani lefanech. Then begins already a seder. So after we explained Moidani, which was really a parenthesis, he said the beginning of davening is hoidu. He says really there's something more, and that's the Moidani lefanach. So now he goes back to the hoidu. Amnam 138, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines from the top. Amnam achen netilas yadayim berchas hashachar. She'oz yashtam kvar ha'koiches pnimim. Oz maschel seder ha'avayda the tefillah atzmot sulam mutzavartza v'reishim magir hashamayim. After netilas yadayim and after berchas hashachar, everything is an experience. In Chassidus, there's nothing gechapt. Every moment is an experience. It requires yishuv hadas, mesinus, pnimius. You don't do it stam, there's an experience there, there's a pnimius there. Nafshi yatsa bedabra. So after Maidani, there's netilas yadayim, there's berchas hashachar. So he says, Shenda de koiches pnimim. You already have the focus on the koiches pnimim, there's already the development, the focus, the tuning in to the individual koiches of a person. As maschel seder avoid the tefillah atzma, the sulam mutzavartza v'reishim magir hashamayim. Now the ladder begins. And what's the ladder, he says? Dascholas hatfili yehoidu la'avaya kiru b'shmoi dagam she'ena shayich la'saga dayin. Even here, the person may not be shayich yet to any understanding or comprehension. Mikol makoim Leah sheyesh b'kvar ischalkus ha'koiches. The birchas anois nasach v'bina pekei chivrim l'chenu yedei l'chalik ben hoidu la'avaya v'kiru b'shmoi. Since, however, there was already an identification of the division of the koiches, there's noisin lasech v'vin is the first bracha in the nusach of the Arizal. The second bracha is pekei chivrim. Noisin lasech v'vin is Hashem gives the rooster understanding, wisdom to distinguish between day and night. Those of you who have some roosters, some Monsey, or have some chickens know that the sechvi has been verschlafnisht. It's not like we verschlaft. No such a thing that the sechvi misses vasikin. O ira shachar, aniya oirer shachar ve'ena shachar moirer oisi. David HaMelech says, I woke up the dawn. O ira shachar, eina shachar moirer oisi. Dawn doesn't wake me up. The sechvi has been lahavchin ben yom uvein laila. What's up is the sechvi? Interesting thing, because the sechvi, the rooster, is mavchin ben yom uvein laila, not after its day. After its day, I'm also mavchin ben yom uvein laila. Not only a rooster is mavchin. Probably every animal, most animals are mavchin ben yom uvein laila, and sometimes even people are mavchin ben yom uvein laila. The chiddush of a rooster is that even when it's dark, before it starts yom, he knows, the rooster knows that dawn is going to break in a few moments. Even though the rooster doesn't have a calendar, he doesn't have a stopwatch, he doesn't have zmanim, Monsey.com to be able to see when Alois is. The rooster has nothing. He sits in verhakt in his coop, wherever he is, but he knows Yom is coming, even before it's light. And in life, that's a very big skill. It's not just the knowledge technically that day is coming. It's that even when it's dark, you know that dawn is about to break. So that's the first thing, the wisdom, the perceptiveness to know the difference between light and darkness. That's a big thing. To know the difference, what's light and what's darkness. What's confusion and what's not confusion. The moment you could say, this is darkness, you're already in a good place. They tell a Maisa that there was once a Fabrengen among Chassidim, and the wine, they were saying l'chaim, and the wine was finished. So the balabas, the owner of the house, asked somebody to go down to the cellar, or the person, the mashpia, asked somebody to go down to the cellar and get wine. So the owner of the house told him, you go down and you go here and here and there, you'll see a case of wine or barrels of wine, and you could bring one up. So this person goes down the stairs to the cellar, but it's pitch dark. So he gives a scream. He says, "Oi, it's pitch dark. I can't see anything." So the owner of the house says, in Yiddish, he says, "Nish gedeiget, steh a paar minut, wirst sich zugeweinen zu der Finsternis, wirst kennen sein." You know, when you stand in darkness for a few minutes, your eyes become accustomed to it, and it becomes a little easier to discern things. So he said, stay there in the darkness for a few minutes. You'll get accustomed to the darkness. Your eyes will adjust, and you'll be able to figure out where the wine is. In the beginning, you're startled, you're overwhelmed. So he gave a scream from the cellar. He says, "Das hab ich meira, sich zugeweinen zu der Finsternis." That's exactly what I'm scared of, that I'm going to become accustomed to the darkness. That once you're here for a few minutes, nicht gefährlich. He says, I don't want to do that. which was, of course, a very powerful message. The challenge is not that there's darkness. The challenge, even more than that, is the person becomes accustomed to the darkness. In other words, the confusion becomes reality, and the depression becomes happiness, and the uncertainty becomes the life, and the darkness becomes the light. So Anoisin Lasech Vivina Lahavchin Ben Yom Uvein Leila is the first bracha we make, according to some nuschayos. Then there's Pekeach Ivrim, vision. You open my eyes, physically and spiritually, vision. Matir Asurim, the person is not in prison. I could stand up, I can flex my muscles. My body moves, my joints are moving, etc. Once you have this chalkus of koiches pnimim, he says, so even though there's no hasaga yet, it's the beginning of davening. And what's davening? Davening is melmata l'mayla. It's not Torah. Torah is Hashem talking to me. Davening is I'm talking to Hashem, so I'm bringing in my whole metzius, my whole reality. Heilach, hareshel cholofanecha. But I already know the difference between hoidu l'Hashem and kiru b'shmai. The hoida hi ba'avaya, or kriya hi b'shmai. Hashem, you say hoidu. Shmai, you say kiru. What's the difference? The b'shem avaya shayach hoida b'lvad. Or b'shmai shua ada yashni yin akriya v'amshach l'mata. Hoidu l'Hashem, kiru b'shmai. When you're talking about Lashem, over there the right word is Haidu. What's Haidu? Haidu is Haida. Haida doesn't mean I really get it. I'm Maida to you. Somebody's arguing with his friend and having a big argument. You're having a Gemara expression. Maidim chachamim l'Reb Meir. Right? Or Maidim Reb Shimon, or Maidim Reb Yosi. In other words, even though I disagreed with you, your arguments are so powerful, I have to be Maida. I have to surrender. I have to submit. Do I really, really get it? Lav dafka. Of Harai, I was arguing with you. But now your arguments are persuasive, so I surrender. So sometimes the Haida comes because I'm fully on board. Sometimes I'm Maida, even though I'm not fully on board. But I'm Maida, I know that this is true. I know that this is right. Sometimes you're not sure how something is right, but you know that it's right. And therefore you're Maida. So he says, Haidu in Hashem. When it comes to Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, over there is Shayach Haida. It's not Hasaga. Shmai is only a name. A name is not the essence. A name is your reputation, your ha'ara, your light, the way you're perceived. Over here, there could already be kiru. Call out to his name. Call out to his name. And when you call somebody, what happens? The person turns around to you. The person comes to you. You say, Yankel, come here, right? David, Sprinze, Faiga. You call, and they turn around to you. They're already coming to you. They walk over to you. At least they turn to you. In Shmai, there could be a kiru. In Havaya, there can only be Haida. So the person knows enough to be able to say, Haidu la Havaya kiru v'Shmai, Haidu v'amim aliloisov. Achadayin yaschallas atfila belvad b'chinas Haida klalas. But this is still just the beginning of davening. The beginning of the ladder, which is Haida klalas, a general submission. What does it mean, a general? We'll soon see what we mean by a general submission. Haida klalas. After you start davening, what's the first step? With Haidu, it's called Psuke de Zimra. And we know Psuke de Zimra. If you look in any Siddur, right, you have a system. There's Maida Ani, there's the brachas before davening. There is what we call the Karbonis. You say the Parsha of the Akedah. You say the Parsha of Karbonis, the Tamid Shel Shachar, Trumas Hadeshen, Parshas Haktoiris, Ezah Mekayman, which is also about Karbonis, and then starts the davening. So according to the Nusach Svart, you start off with Haidu L'Hashem Kiru B'Shmai, Haidu V'amam Aliloisav, and then soon after, Mizmor Shir Chanukas, you do Baruch Shamar. Now starts a section in davening called Psuke de Zimra. Why is it called Psuke de Zimra? Psuke de Zimra means the verses of praise. Because basically Psuke de Zimra is, it starts with a bracha Baruch Shamar V'aya Olam, and then we go through different Mizmoirim of Tehillim. We start off with Mizmor L'Saida, Yehi Chvoid, which are all from David HaMelech's Tehillim, and then we do the last kapitlach, right? Asher Yoshev Esachad Yaluchasela is Tehillim kapitel Kuf Mem Hey, till the end, Tehillim Kuf Nun, that finishes Hallelujah, Lukel B'Kotshai, and then starts the section with Vayivarech David and Shiras Hayam and Yishtabach. That ends Psuke de Zimra. We say Baruch Hu. If there's a minyan, you say Baruch Hu, and you go to Birchas Krishma. This is called Psuke de Zimra, the verses of praise. So he says, Shemesaper b'em shmache shal makam. In Psuke de Zimra, one speaks about, one tells the story of the praises of Hashem. Even though here there's also no real avoid of hasaga, comprehension. Rather, what there is primarily is hispilus. Hispilus means the rest nispal. The word hispilus comes from the word pu'ula, which means you're affected, you're moved. The word hispilus means you're moved. You're moved from the praises of Hashem. But it's not hasaga. It's not real comprehension. What does it mean? In Haidu, not only is there no hasaga, comprehension, there's also no hispilus. You're not even really moved. There's just Haidah. You acknowledge. You're not moved. In Psuke de Zimra, there's already hispilus. Hispilus means you're moved. In Haidu, you acknowledge. You're not moved necessarily emotionally. In Psuke de Zimra, there's already a hispilus. There's already an emotional reaction. The Avshein even though he doesn't really grasp it, Psuke de Zimra. Who sipur gdulasi is barach binyan ishavos yesh meyayin. What does Psuke de Zimra focus on? It speaks about Hashem's infinity being expressed in the creation of something from nothing. That's what basically all Psuke de Zimra is. Starts off those words. Baruch sha'amar, you always see things from the first words. Baruch sha'amar v'haya ha'elam. He spoke, and the world came into being. Baruch hu, Baruch ha'imava'isa, Baruch ha'isa. And then we start off, and throughout Psuke de Zimra, we speak a lot about creation. All the mizmarim, in one way or another, it focuses on this element of creation, that element of creation. Whether it's kihu tziva v'nivro, yalo shem Hashem ki discourse shmelovade, the different types of nivroim, from snow to ravens, from animals to fire, from vapor to mountains, from insects to creeping, crawling, tiny little creatures, from people to chayis and behemoths and malche. We go through the various phenomena of nature and expressing it and discussing how it's essentially a creation and a continuous creation of Hashem. How creation happens is not something we can comprehend. But we could be moved from it. We can be affected by it. We can be stirred by it, even if we don't mamash get it. To explain this, the reason yesh me'ayin, the creation of yesh me'ayin, is not comprehended by the created beings is because when you comprehend something, that means it's pnimiyistic, it's internalized. The word hasaga comes from the word musag. What does musag mean? Hasaga, it's grasped. Lahasig, and in Hebrew you'll say, you want to grasp it, you want to reach it. Hasaga means I reached it, I got it. I have it in my clutches, I have it in my fist, or I have it in my brain. If every created being would comprehend yesh me'ayin, if we would get it, then we would cease to exist as separate beings. Because if I would see that my entire mitzias, my whole reality is being created right now, yesh me'ayin, there would be no way that I could speak about it. The I would cease to be. The Alter Rebbe, the Balatanya says in Tanya Perek Mem Gimel, the Gemara says, Ezel Chacham Haroyes HaNoilad. Who's a Chacham? Somebody who sees the Noilad. It's translated, the one who sees the future, the one who sees what will be born. Unwise people see the present, and wise people see the future. And really wise people see not only the immediate future, but the long-term future. And truly wise people see far, far ahead of time. Yeah, they see ahead 100 years, 200 years. In everything in life, I'm eating something, but what's the future? What's going to be in an hour? I'm saying something, but what's the future? Frek de Balatanya, according to this, it should have said, Haraya es sheyivolet. He sees that which will be born. Haraya sanoilad means he sees that which is born, not that which will be born. The point of Raya Sanoilad is that even though now it's pregnant, it's going to be born. Raya Sanoilad, though, doesn't mean that. It means that he sees that which is born. So the Alter Rebbe says, Eizo Chacham Raya Sanoilad means a Chacham is somebody who sees that the whole world is being born right now, Yesh Me'ayin. That's Raya Sanoilad. A Chacham is somebody who sees that right now creation is emerging Yesh Me'ayin. We look at creation static. So da Welt, what's a real Chacham? Haraya Sanoilad. He sees the process of birth. He sees that the whole existence, every moment of existence, everything of existence, including myself, including my brain, including my ability to be, including every element, is right now being born something from nothing, from the divine energy. When a person realizes this, that's Chachma. Chachma is Kayach Ma. Kayach Ma is bittul, like we learned many times. So if the Nivra would really get Yesh Me'ayin, we would cease to be as separate beings. Because it would be obvious that my whole Metzius is what? Is just a manifestation of divine energy. Al derech hamavur be'inyan yoidei toivera. Similar to what's explained in Torah, Parshas Bereshis by the Balatanya, about Adam and Chava knowing good and evil when they eat from the tree. What's the problem if they knew good and evil? Shayidiyah shalamayla b'bchinas makif. Aval ayidiyah shebenevroyim yidiyah pnimis. V'lechein soifel lifel ala nevroyim. Malachim could know good and evil. A person, when you know something, it becomes part of you. So when Adam and Chava know about Tov and Ra, they become Tov and Ra. Because a person is a pnimi, a malach is a makif. A person is a pnimi, meaning when I know something, it's part of me. There's no such a thing. I know something and it's completely objective. It's nothing, not connected to me. If I know it, it becomes part of my experience. This is the greatness of an Adam. An Adam is a pnimi. What's a pnimi? Everything in the world is connected to an Adam. Everything is internalized in an Adam. We could find ourselves in everything and we can find everything in ourselves. Olam katan za Adam. So when a person knows something, that knowledge is who I am. It becomes part of who I am. We don't live in a way that I could know something and it doesn't affect me. If you know it, it's part of you. Malachim could know about Ra as objective reporters. People say, I'm objective. There's no such a thing, you're objective. If you know about it, it's already part of who you are. You're learning about somebody else's life and another reality. But the very fact that you know that reality, the way we know something is by finding it in ourselves. It already becomes part of me. I'm a changed person. When a malach knows Toiv and Ra, it doesn't affect him. Because the malach could know something not in an internalized fashion. He knows there's such a thing called Ra. When a person knows it, it already becomes part of me. The Ra is inside of me. So when Adam and Chava become Yoidei Toiv Ra, it redefines their reality forever. Now they need to do birur. Now starts Avodas HaBirur. Now they have to separate between the Toiv and the Ra and figure out what's Toiv and what's Ra. That's why the first question is Ayeka, who are you? So he says, Yediyah shebenevraim yediyah pnimis v'lechein soifel lifel al hanevraim. Ulazais ilu hayu hanevraim asigim inyan isavos yesh me'ayin. The top of 139, if the nevraim would comprehend yesh me'ayin, hine soif, volt das ze durchgenommen, vayim esbatlem metziusam. In Yiddish he says, ultimately it would penetrate them, and they would cease to be separate. Al derech mashakasav betanya, this is similar to what it says in Tanya. Second part of Tanya, Shar hayichud v'emunah gimel, the ilu nitna rishus la'ayin liris ha'ayin eliki hayu hanevrayim p'telim b'metzius. If the physical eye would have permission to see the divine nothingness, ayin eliki means the divine nothingness, every created being would cease to be a separate entity. This is what it says in Tanya. What's the Havana? When I look at the world, what do I see? I'm looking, I see a table, I see a cup of coffee, I see a video camera, I see some very special souls on Zoom. I know that there are some special souls on the yeshiva.net, but I can't see you. Hopefully you could see me. I see a mic, I see a chair. That's what I see. I see a window, Soon I'll probably see some deer, hopefully come for the morning visit, come to the shir. Or at least a couple of squirrels. We see trees. This is the real world that we see. This is what we see. So the Alter Rebbe says, if the eye, ilu nitner reshus la'ayin liris, it's hafladika words. If the eye would have permission, meaning if the eye was transparent, if the eye would be able to detect a deeper form of reality, what would we see in everything? We wouldn't see a yesh. We would see the ayin haliki. Ayin haliki means divine nothingness. How do you call divine nothingness? Yesh me ayin, something from nothing. Not nothing, Hashem. He's not nothing. Fakert. Mimcha hakol, from him comes everything. The pshat is, in our world we call it nothing. Why do we call it nothing? Because we have no way to grasp it. For me, something that's physical exists. Divine energy, my eyes don't tell me it exists, my ears don't hear it, my nose does not smell it, and my hand does not touch it, and my mouth does not taste it. So what makes it a yesh? A piece of cake, or even a cucumber I can taste. A table I can touch. A person I can see. My hand I can feel. Your voice I can hear. But elikus, the divine energy, it's ayin. It's nothing. What does it mean it's nothing? From the perspective of my tools, it doesn't exist. It's called ayin. But the truth is it's the other way around. That ayin is much more yesh than anything else. Because the whole yesh that we are experiencing comes from that ayin. And is therefore batal legabe that ayin. You know, when the Alter Rebbe said this in Tanya, he wrote this in Shari Yichud V'Amunah Pei Gimel. It's the late 1700s. It was hard for people to understand. What does this mean? If the eye would have permission, you would see. Okay. Zamais with the Kashnitz Magid. The Hilik Kashnitz Magid. Schusa Yagan Aleinu. So he was, so what they say, Amaydidik Amaisa, before he passed away. Rabbi Yisrael of Kashnitz. He passed away the same year like the Balatanya, or a year later. Tov Kufayin Gimel, Tov Kufayin Dalet, 1813, 1814. He was a Talmud of the Magid, Avodas Yisrael, the Kashnitz Magid. So they say that before he passed away, his son was there. And his son says, his son was holding his father's hand. So his father, the Kashnitz Magid, tells his son, he says these words, Ich bin schon nicht kein Gif. I don't have a body anymore. I'm not a body anymore. I'm not a body anymore. He was moments before he passed away. He says, I'm not a body. So his son was holding his hand. He says, Tata, ich, in a Polish Yiddish, ich tap dich gif. I feel your body. What do you mean you're not a body? He asked his father, good to Shiloh. I feel your body. He was holding his guf. So the Bisrael Kajnitzer told him, the tapst mit gif fills the gif. You're touching me with your body, so you're experiencing a body. The tools that we use, the instruments that we use to define reality, those are the instruments that will determine what the reality is, and they will not be able to go beyond themselves. If you didn't understand what I just said, listen over, because this is critical. Each of us has tools through which we determine reality, and they ascertain what reality is, and we can't get further. The taps mit gif fills the gif. You're touching me with your guf. Of course you're going to feel guf. You're not going to feel anything outside of guf. You're touching me with guf, so what do you want to relate to? Ayin. You're touching with yesh, you're going to get yesh, you're not going to get ayin. And this is the edelkeit of Pnimius. The edelkeit of Chassidus is to start using different tools to which to detect reality. You have to use different tools. It's also true very much psychologically. We process stories that happen. The tools that we use to process those stories determine what those stories are. MS, Rebbe Zriel, MS. The tools, one of the most important things you have to teach your clients, your patients, your friends, is the stories are based on the tools I'm using to process those stories. And if I only have 3 tools, if I have in my treasure chest a hammer and a screwdriver and a plier, and they all have one size. The screwdriver, the plier, everything fits into that. If I have in my head 3 ways by which to process stories, every story becomes part of this. I have to open up myself to different tools. So when Alter Rebbe wrote this in Tanya, it seemed very difficult to understand. What is the meaning of this? I mentioned this to you, I think, once, when we were learning maybe via Daita Moskva, that there was a great physicist. He's considered the father of quantum theory. His name was Max Planck. And he said something. I remember when I saw it the first time, it was startling to me. And I can't tell you exactly what he meant because I'm not a physicist, and I'm not a quantum physicist, and I'm not a quantum theorist. And I'm not an expert on Planck, who was a brilliant man. He won a Nobel Prize for it. I think he was a shtickle chavrusa with Albert Einstein at some point. They spoke, or they learned together, they studied together. But he said a line, I'm going to share with you the line. I'm not saying it verbatim, but the teichen is from him. He said, we regard matter, we regard consciousness as a derivative of matter. He says that's not the case. All matter is a derivative of consciousness. Now listen to those words. We always looked at consciousness. Consciousness is the way we look at the world. It comes from matter. Matter is a fact. This cup is a fact. This table is a fact. You hear it. It's a fact. I'm not dreaming. It's not a cholam. Consciousness is a derivative of matter. Now the question is how I look at the table, what I think of the table, what the table does for me. Do I like the table? Do I not like the table? Is it too small? Is it too big? Is it too hard? Is it too soft? Do I want to change the table? Fine. This coffee is a metzius. I like the coffee. It's too mild. It's too strong. It's this gesundheit. This is a metzius. I like my nose. I don't like my nose. It's too long. It's too but it's a metzius. Consciousness comes from matter. He says that's not true. Matter is a derivative of consciousness. Meaning the reason there's gashmius is because I think there's gashmius. Now this is secular physics. This is not Tanya. The reason there's gashmius is because I think there's gashmius. There's no gashmius. Matter is a derivative of consciousness. All matter is a product of my thoughts. Because my eyes have certain kishroinus. My eyes have a certain misgeris. They have a certain personality. They have certain instruments. They have tools that my eyes use and my brain uses to determine reality. So I look at the table and what do I see? I see a table. Consciousness is not a derivative of matter. Matter is a derivative of consciousness. Change your mind and change your find. And we all know today with microscopes, if I would have microscopic eyes, I would look at a concrete, physical, dead reality and I would see it's much more alive than I would ever imagine. Even one drop of water. Never mind something larger in the world. It's so dynamic, it's so alive. If you can get to see the atomic structure of anything, you see the movement, the life, the vibrancy, the harmony, the electrons revolving around the nucleus of the atom in this constant, incessant orbit, which is astronomical in its precision and its meticulousness. And also how many in one tiny drop of water, how many atoms, beyond human imagination. But who sees this? So we know even from a very physical, scientific perspective, if my eye would be more open to be able to be and have the ability to see deeper layers of reality, nothing would be dead. Everything would be alive. Comes the Alter Rebbe and says, Ilu nitner reshus la'ayin liris. You know what you would see? You would see the ayin eliki. You wouldn't see a yesh. You would see the ayin eliki. You would see what we call nothingness. What we call nothingness, that's what you would see. It's interesting because 99.9% of an atom is empty space. So really, when I look at anything, what should I see? I should see 99% empty space. But my eyes don't like ayin. So my eye makes out one big yesh, one big cholent. I take the little tiny matter, and that becomes the focus, and it fills in the gaps for them who sees empty space. Because the ayin turns reality into its own, a product of its own experiences. There's no reality. The reality is a product of my consciousness, of my perspective on reality. A different perspective is a different reality. So, ilu nitni rishus la'ayin lidis. What happens if the eyes would see everything? What would we see? If your eyes and my eyes would see reality, what would we see? There's still a world. Hashem makes the world. But what would you see? You would see that the whole yesh is simply a manifestation of the divine. So everything is really divine. So if the doors of our perception were cleansed, everything would appear as is, infinite. So that would be bittul b'metzias. You would cease to be separate. You would cease to be a metzias. Your whole metzias would be a manifestation of the koyach eliki. Ezel chacham haraya es hanoilet. The Chavra understand? Versteht? Al derech ze moven linyan hasagas inyan yesh meyayin. Aval mikol makayim sipur shvacha shal makim binyan isavas yesh meyayin av shein be'hasaga hu poyel his spilus. Even though there's no hasaga in yesh meyayin, I don't really get it. I can talk about it, but I don't really grasp it. Because if I would really grasp it, what would happen? There would be nobody to grasp. If I would really grasp it, I wouldn't grasp it. You understand what I just said? If I would grasp it, there would be no eye to grasp. So I don't want to grasp it. Sometimes we don't want to understand something. You know why? Because if we understand it, we're going to have to change. It's much better not to understand it. It's, I would say, one of the big motives of people not to understand things. They understand everything, but they tell themselves that they don't understand. We call it in English playing dumb. But I don't mean playing dumb consciously. I mean playing dumb subconsciously. Ich verstehe. But I make believe, my consciousness tells me I don't understand anything. Because if I do understand, my whole life has to change. Who wants to do that? So it's better I remain atypish, I remain a tam, and I say mazois, or sheni yedei lishul, and then I don't have to change. The moment you get it, you can't be the same person. So who wants to get it? I think I once told you, very geschmacke Indian, geschmacke Wort. There was a Yid, Chaim Potak. Chaim Potak was a Jew. He lived in Philadelphia. He passed away a few years ago. He was a very talented writer. I think he was officially a conservative rabbi. He went to yeshiva. He was an educated man. He wrote a lot of books. Very famous books. The Chosen, Book of Light, My Name is Asher Lev. He was very popular in his day. And he was an interesting person. His name was Potak. He was a very famous Jewish writer and novelist. So I once heard from him. He said this. He said that he was being interviewed or something. I heard him say, he said that throughout his life, he used to come a lot of times to the Fabrengens of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but he never went on Yechidus. He never went into her private meeting with the Rebbe. Now, he was around in the 40s and the 50s. He was a student in New York, in the seminary, I think. The 60s, and he knew about it. He said he never came for it. Why? He said, I'll tell you why. He said, because I heard that the Rebbe is so charismatic and he has such a powerful personality. I was afraid that if I'm going to go meet him privately, I'm going to lose my objectivity and I'll just become another chassid. He's going to affect me too deeply. So I wanted to retain a distance so I could be objective, I could be critical. So I would go to Fabrengens, I could listen to him, I could watch him, but to go face to face with him, I would have lost my objectivity towards him. I would have been drawn in based on what I suspected when I heard him and I heard about him and I saw him. So I decided I have to keep my distance and not get too close. Because if I get too close, there's no going back. Interesting word. So my brother, Simon, told me that he was once doing a Shabbaton in New Jersey, Rutgers University in New Jersey. Rutgers, Rabbi Kalbach. And who else was at the Shabbaton? Chaim Potak. my brother, Rabbi YY Jacobson, and Chaim Potak were together doing Shabbos. So Chaim Potak said this at the lecture Friday night. He said that he never wanted to meet the Rebbe personally so that he shouldn't become subjective. He should always be able to remain distant. So when my brother stood up, he said, unfortunately, or fortunately, I can't say that about myself, that I have that objectivity. I did go into the Rebbe, and I was by the Rebbe a lot. And it did affect me very deeply. But then he said, Mr. Potak, or Dr. Potak, I want to ask you a question. Because Chaim Potak was very proud of this. He said, I want to ask you a question. He said, I don't mean to compare it exactly, but it's just a question that I'm thinking about. If you lived in the generation of the Jews that left Egypt, and Moses was telling the Jews, and you were one of them, tomorrow we're going to Mount Sinai. And at Mount Sinai, God is going to reveal himself to you. Would have you refused to be at Sinai so that you should be able to be objective? Because once you're by Har Sinai and ponim beponim dibur Hashem imachem, how objective can you be about faith? Or you would say, no, sorry, I can't be at Matan Torah because I have to retain my distance so I could be objective. I could write articles, maybe there's God, maybe there's no God. And this is an important vart in life. We're so afraid of being brainwashed. We're so afraid of losing our individuality, of losing our personality, that we can't touch truth anymore. Because I'm going to be brainwashed. Now, it's good to be very critical. It's good. It's good to avoid. People are brainwashed. People are in cults. People lose their critical thinking power. But that's a question. If you had an opportunity to be at Har Sinai, would you say, sorry, objectivity is not something to be worshipped? This was his mistake. Objectivity is a tool to be able to find real emes. What happened in these days is objectivity became an avodah zarah. Oh, you're subjective? Oh, you're brainwashed. You're tzedreita. You're meshugana. You're objective? I'm a chaya, Baruch Hashem. You're a koifer? Baruch Hashem, you're objective. It's a shtus. And what if it's emes? And what if it's emes? Shayta. You're the biggest shayta. Objectivity, I don't mean personal that you're a shayta, I mean the concept. Objectivity is a tool that you shouldn't fall prey to every charlatan. You shouldn't fall prey to bias. You shouldn't fall prey to blind spots. You shouldn't be involved in confirmation bias. You should be critical. You should look for the truth. Not what you like, but what the emes is. But if you're going to be at Har Sinai, you're going to experience Atzmus Saint Sof Baruch Hu, you're not going to be there. So that you should be able to be objective, should be able to be in darkness for the rest of your life and be mesupik. The Baal Shem Tov said, it says in Dvarim, Hashem tells Moshe, we're reading these weeks, Ki Hashem Moshe tells the Jews, Ki Hashem alekecha eish eichlahu. Hashem is fire. So the Baal Shem Tov said, what's Pshati's fire? With fire is one of two things. Either you stay away, or you become part of it. You become consumed by it. If somebody says, I'm going to stick my hand into fire, but not too much because I want to remain objective, then just stay away. The moment a person sticks their hand in fire, it's sakanas nefashos. Either you stay away and you enjoy the fire from a distance, or you get consumed in it. Hashem alekecha eish eichlu. Elikus is eish. If it's emes, it requires bittul b'metzias. And if it's not emes, so stay away. Stay away. But this is not easy for people because I want the cake and I want to eat it too. So my mind tells me I don't understand, because if I would understand, then I would have to change my life. It's much better. I'm not sure. I don't understand. You do. Of course you understand. What don't you understand? Of course you understand. You're making believe that you don't understand so that you could continue to be a victim. Because if I understand, how can I be a victim? I know the truth. I'm not saying we do this consciously always, but sometimes subconsciously, I make myself dumb, because if I understand, nothing is going to be the same ever again. So maybe I don't understand. So that's what the Rebbe is saying here. The moment is hasaga and yesh me'ayin, you're not the same person. So hasaga and yesh mayayin we don't have. But his spilus from yesh mayayin, that we have. That we have. That's what he says. Hu poyel is spilus. That's why it's called Psuke de Zimna. It's a song. What does a song do to a person? You don't have to understand the song, but you're moved by a song. MS. You hear a niggin, you always understand it? No, but it touches you. It moves you. Se zingt sich. Kumi roini balayla. Shivchi chamayim libech. It's a hispilus. You hear a beautiful niggin, you understand it. You're not necessarily a music connoisseur. You know how it was written, how it was composed, what tenu is, how to sing it, exactly the chush hanegina that's being expressed. You don't always understand it, but you're moved by it. It touches you. You're not the same person. You're affected by it. So it's called Psuke de Zimna. Psuke de Zimna is a niggin. It's a niggin. It's a shid of a zimna. Psuke de Zimna you say with a niggin. You have to say it with a niggin. It's a nekuda of hispilus. You're singing a song. Va'po'ula de Psuke de Zimna benefesh bederech kike me bechutz. Hainu she'ein zuch kike me befnim mishum she'ein beza asaga. Aval mekom mokem mitzad hispilus it is a po'el kike me bechutz. How does it affect a person? It's called engraving, an engraving within the soul from outside, even if not from inside, from outside. When you have a kais, a cup, there's a chakike me bifnim, there's engraving it from inside, and then there's a chakike me bechutz, as he will explain, the engraving it from the outside. Psuke de Zimna is not yet a chakike me bifnim, but it's a chakike me bechutz. Let me take some questions. It takes so much work and it takes so much time to see the divine reality in everything. But with LSD or other psychedelics, one can see this by just swallowing it once. We live in a microwave instant age, and that's why many people want to take these substances, because it allows them to see it immediately. Okay, how do you want me to respond to that? So you mean you want me, instead of giving a shiur here in the morning, I should do something else with everybody? Is that a suggestion? So the nekuda is as follows. The bottom line is that stimulation that comes from the outside, even if it's very, very powerful, and sometimes it brings certain people to certain levels of awareness, but ultimately you have to find the pnimius, you have to find it inside of you. And that's what Chassidus does. You're right, Chassidus is not, you learn it and you're flying high. It doesn't work that way. But it's pnimius, it becomes part of you. It becomes part of your nefesh habahamas. When you learn and learn and learn Chassidus and you think about it, I mean with a good teacher. I don't mean to learn the words. People learn the words, they don't understand it. You learn it with yourself or a chavrusa or a good teacher. You internalize it. You understand it according to your ability. And you live with it. You breathe it. You live with it. You daven with it. You learn with it. You live it. You become a different person. It's not just you have a substance and you're open to a new reality. And I'm not denying the fact that there were certain individuals at certain stages of their life that these things you described opened them up to new realities. But the question is, what happens afterwards? When you become used to living on an alternate reality as a result of a drug, ultimately it's not authentic. And anything that's not authentic is not going to last. We have to be able to internalize these things. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Can you give a practical example of how to approach a difficult challenge, knowing it's only divine energy, and how not to become a victim of it? Yet, how to be present to the details it manifests in the matter, if matter is a derivative of consciousness. So tell us how we can approach a difficult challenge, knowing it's divine energy, not to become a victim of it, and be present to the details in the matter. if matter is a derivative of consciousness. You think this question was written by a man or by a woman, Chavra? What do you think? Well, there's a lot to say about this. The only thing I would say, it's a pretty long discussion. We spoke about this many times, but the only point I would say is, somebody says it was for sure a woman, not a man. Men are not looking for practical examples, yeah? Yesh v'yesh. Okay. The only thing I would say is that, like he says here in the Maamar, we can't always comprehend it, or maybe we could never really comprehend it, but we could allow it to move us. And I think what that means in every moment is, sometimes we have a very big challenge and we have a very painful situation on our hands and we have to deal with a complicated reality. But if we realize that at every single moment right now, the world and our brain and our thought processes are being created, and the truth of this moment is Elikus, it's the Ayin Halaki, it doesn't take away the fact that this is the reality I'm dealing with. But what it means is two things. First of all, I'm not powerless. I'm not stuck. We're not stuck in a particular situation. This is how it is. We're stuck. We can be creative. We could look out of the box because all of matter is out of the box. The moment we look at things in a stuck fashion, in the box, it means we're not in touch with reality. To be in touch with reality means that you could think out of the box because everything is being created right now. And if it's being created right now, so don't get stuck in the present reality. What we call the power of now. Everything is happening right now, this very moment. Could I look at it from a very fresh perspective? And my perspective has an impact on the reality. Because if I could see a different reality, if I could see things in a different way, I'm actually tuning in to a different level of reality where they are a different way. So this is part of what we do. And in a very practical way, what this means is, let's say somebody's being confronted and the situation is very, very painful. You can't necessarily eliminate the pain and everything is dandy and everything is wonderful and everything is perfect. But what I could say is that behind everything that's going on, there's a lakus. There's an ayin aliki in every single yesh, meaning in every conversation, in every mitzias, in my very brain cells, in the neurons that are being fired. Everything, there's a koyach aliki over there. And therefore, if I don't get so nispal, if I don't get so affected by the external yesh, and I look for the ayin aliki, you know what can happen here? What can happen here is, I can find how this experience is actually meaningful and purposeful, and it can help me grow, and can help me become more divine. If you want to put it in other words, as somebody put it this way, every moment and every experience is God reaching out to me and saying, I want a relationship with you. Can we look at life that way? So you'll say, what do you mean? What a relationship? This and this happened. My child said this. My husband said this. My wife said this. My mother said this. My father said this. My mother-in-law said this. My father-in-law said this. My employer, my employee, they said this. And we had an argument and we had a debate and we had a problem and we had a struggle. Where's their eye in here? It's real. That's real. That's what I'm seeing, that's what I'm hearing, that's what I'm feeling, and you have to be able to respect that, because we live in the world where Hashem made yesh me'ayin. He didn't make ayin, he made yesh me'ayin. But the question I have to ask myself is, can I look at all of this and then say, all of this ultimately is being powered and energized by the divine. There's an ayin here. And if I could look at that ayin, even from my limited perspective, can I actually perceive this as an opportunity and an invitation from the Ribbono Shel Olam to get closer to Him, which means to get closer to myself, to uncover another layer behind the external yesh, to go much deeper into myself and find that. And when you could do that, when I can do that, we align the yesh with the ayin. This is one way of dealing with all this. Of course, there's a lot to say, and this is the avodah that each of us has to figure out, Next question. The answer that chemicals are temporary and external, whereas learning these things becomes permanent and internal, is the point I wanted to show. Okay, very good. I wish everybody a very wonderful day and a beautiful day.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.